Hello, I'm Erin, and I'm here to talk to you all today about skipping senior year and the many lessons that I learned not going to school. So I'll do a little backtracking. I was diagnosed with asthma in 5th grade, and it wasn't really a big deal. In fact, through middle school was kind of a blessing because I was a little chubby and lazy, so it got me out of gym class all the time. And it wasn't really a problem up until the beginning of my junior year of high school, where I developed this sort of chronic cough. Some of you might have heard it earlier. It sounds like if you were to strangle a goose, and it's very loud. And it would interrupt my daily life, and no one really knew what was happening. But I developed this complex of if I think hard enough, it'll go away. If I try, I can overcome asthma. And April of my junior year of high school, I couldn't think my way out of an asthma attack, so I was hospitalized for 2 days. And that brings me the first lesson that I learned, and a lesson that I think we all learn over time, and it's that we're not invincible, and it's okay to be weak sometimes, and you can't outthink some problems that happen, and that's okay. So I was hospitalized for 2 days, and in my time at the hospital, I had to take a lung x-ray, or chest x-ray, and I was in the children's hospital at Lowell General, and their x-rays weren't working, so we had to go into the emergency room. So I got into a wheelchair, because at the time I couldn't walk and breathe at the same time, so they're like, we'll just push you there. So I had my Johnny and a blanket over my legs, and they put a mask over my face, a very big mask, because they didn't know what I had, and it's cool. So I was in my wheelchair, and they wheeled me down, and as I was passing clouds, the clouds slowly faded, and we entered the emergency room, or a horror movie scene. There were flickering lights, people were coughing, babies were crying, and so it was a little scary for me. And as we approached the x-ray room, there was a mother and daughter that was on the side of the hallway, and I connected eyes with the little girl, and I smiled really big, and I waved. But she couldn't see my smile because I had a big mask on, so what she saw was just eyes staring at her and a slow wave, which is terrifying. So she seized up and she moved towards her mom, and that was the first time I ever really felt embarrassed, like at all, ever in my life. And so it was a new feeling for me, and it was weird and strange, and I developed this complex where I was afraid of people giving me the wrong attention for my asthma. And that stayed with me for a little while. And so I left the hospital and I went back to school. And during that time in the year, we were getting ready to put on a musical called Chicago. And as it progressed, my asthma got worse, and it got to a point where I was doing something called a nebulizer every 4 hours. And it's this big tubing machine, and it makes a lot of noise. It vibrates as little puffs of medicine. And I'd be in corners of rooms behind racks of costumes, or often practice rooms doing nebulizers during rehearsals. And I had a friend named Erin. There's a picture of him over there. And he's a sick kid too. So he came up and he would talk to me, and we'd bond over our many medications, and he's really confident and funny, and he helped me a lot to remember something that I'd forgotten, which is to not be embarrassed about things. And that's my second lesson. Don't be embarrassed, ever, because it's a stupid emotion. And as teenagers and young adults and even adults, we feel like we have to be embarrassed about everything, like the way we look, the way we talk, our family, weird aspects of ourselves, and it's stupid, and we spend too much time on it, so don't do it. And so we had the musical, and unfortunately my asthma continued to spiral down, and so it was decided that I would not attend my last 3 weeks of junior year. And a lot of learning happens in those 3 weeks, so we had to talk to teachers. And some teachers were nice about it. They're like, oh, you know what? You've tried. I understand you're going through a struggle. I'll pass you. And then one teacher in particular, I had missed a lot of classes because I was being dismissed from school so regularly, so she thought it would be best if I redid the entire semester online. So that was rough. And so that brings me to my third lesson, and that some people are not going to understand, and they're not going to show you the type of compassion that you wish that they did. They're not going to understand your struggles, even as much as you try to explain. And I think the faster you learn how to accept that, the easier it will be to live. And so in those 3 weeks of my junior year, I got a special asthma and allergy doctor, and it was revealed that I was allergic to grass and trees and life. And I had all these very, very intense allergies, and so that was what was causing all of my asthma troubles, because I have allergic asthma. And so with that, we got new medication. I was on steroids. I did a bunch of stuff. Ask me about any inhaler. I'll tell you about it. I tried it. And so, but summer was approaching, and summer meant that I would be going to an overnight camp in which I worked. And it was an overnight camp that I went to as a child, and it's my mecca. It's like my place that I love the most. I thrive. It's just, it's my thing, and I love it. And so I was so excited about it. And so I got ready, got all the medication that I needed, all the doctor's appointments, and I went off to camp. And I lasted for a week, and it was a great week. But the thing is, camp is on an island in a forest, so I'm surrounded by everything I'm allergic to. And so it was a little difficult. And one night, we were all headed down to campfire, and bug spray was everywhere, and my lungs just kind of quit on me. So we decided that I'd have to leave and go to the emergency room to breathe again. And so we boarded on this little boat, and we just went across Lake Winnipesaukee, and I threw this giant pity party for myself. I thought asthma was taking away the thing that I loved most. It had taken away 3 weeks of my schooling. It had ruined my life as a 16-year-old, and I would never survive. And so as we approached the middle of the lake, I was surrounded by these great pines and an endless water, stars above me, great mountains with just the residue of a sunset on it. And I realized that I'm so small in comparison to everything, that my troubles are not nearly as large as I thought they were. And that is, and I recalled the words of my mother, buck up. And so I was there in the middle of the lake, and I suddenly realized all these things, and that is my fourth lesson to you, and it's buck up, because you're small. And people, and teenagers especially, we feel angsty all the time, like every day. Our woe is the greatest woe, our sorrow is the deepest of sorrow, and the tragedy that we experience is the greatest tragedy in this world. But let me tell you, it feels like the greatest tragedy because it's the only tragedy that has ever happened to you. There's much worse things to come in your future, and you're going to be fine. You're going to make it, I promise. And so that was my fourth lesson. And that motivated me a lot throughout the rest of the summer as I was home. And I went through sort of waves of motivation. There were days where I was like, I can do anything. I am alive, I can breathe, life is good. I'm going to go climb a mountain. And then there were days where I was like, I'm going to go sit in a dark room and read the collected work of Sylvia Plath. And so it was rough. And so on one of the days that I felt invincible, I was like, I'm going to plant a garden. That's very cool, very hip. So I got a weed whacker, and I was doing my thing, and I actually weed whacked some poison ivy directly into my face. So I went on another round of steroids and crazy things. I looked like a little bit of Elephant Man. And so it was crazy. And I started watching more art house films and reading more Sylvia Plath and did less of the invincible things. And so it was a rough summer. But as the summer ended, I was going back to school, and I was excited, and I was like, this is my senior year. This is the peak of high school, and for some football players, life. So I'm so pumped. This is it. And so I go into school, and our school's a great school, but it is built on a former landfill. So there is some troubles with it, and my sensitive lungs, they got those troubles, the worst of them. So I would come into school, and then I would have an asthma attack, and I'd leave immediately. And then the next day, I'd come into school, and I'd stay out those 2 periods, and then I'd have an asthma attack and leave. And so this system obviously wasn't working. So we decided that wearing a mask in school would help me breathe easier. And it was actually the same exact mask that I had worn in the hospital months before. Except this time, instead of walking past a mother and a daughter, I walked through hallways of my peers and judgmental high school girls and people staring at me, and it was a little rough. And I began to feel embarrassed because as a person who thrives on a great deal of attention, this is not the kind of attention that I wanted. That only lasted for a week as well, because the mask ended up not working. So it was decided that I should go to school online and take 2 classes in the PAC. So this is my classroom, my senior year, this room that we're in right now. And so this room, all of my education happened. And this room I got in all the social activity of my day, which is rough, because I need a lot of social activity to be a human. It's me. I'm very much a performer. And so the months that came after were a little hard because I felt bad for myself. I forgot about that moment on the lake. I forgot Buck Up, even though, I was at home all the time. My mom was there. She'd yelling things. So it was rough. But as the months continued, I also was starting to apply to college. And I didn't do very well on online school for a number of reasons. I had new medication. I was very tired all the time, and I started to lose motivation. And because I wasn't doing well with online classes, and because my grades at the end of junior year had not been what I was the high honors that I was used to, I convinced myself that I would not only not get into college, but I'd probably not get a job and then be homeless on the street, because that's how my mind works. I just assume a paper cut is a giant laceration and I'm dying. So this is my next lesson is that the world is not ending. So even a lot of troubles we see can be magnified often by just a little bit of stress. And the world did not end for me, even though I was convinced that it did. And in December of my senior year of high school, I started a new asthma treatment. And it was a drug called Xolair. And before you are allowed to take Xolair, you have to do some online research, because you have to accept taking the drug, because it has some side effects. And it can have some rough stuff that comes along with it. And what it does is that it breaks my immune system. It's like an overachiever, It thinks that everything is poison, so it just coughs. So I cough, and I think I overreact. And so what this drug does, it calms down the immune system. But what can happen is that instead of calming it down, my immune system can overreact and I can go into anaphylactic shock. Or it'll calm my immune system down so much that I have a higher chance of getting cancer or getting other sicknesses. So we had lots of paperwork to do. But it was in the end decided that I should try this drug. because there was not a lot of other options. And so on the first time you get 2 shots, and they hurt a lot. They have it's a very thick serum that is injected into you. And then you have to wait for 2 hours, because the first 24 hours after getting your first shot is the most risk of getting anaphylactic shock. And those first 2 hours are vital. So I stayed in the doctor's office, and in those 2 hours, I reflected a lot. There's a very small chance that I was going to get into anaphylactic shock, and because I'm a very dramatic human being, I was like, I'm dying. This is it for me. And so in those 2 hours, I reflected a lot on my year, and I realized that I shouldn't be focusing all of my energy on being sad, or not focusing all my energy on feeling bad for myself and thinking about all the things that I don't have. So I also brought a book, and it was called Hector and the Search for Happiness, or in the Secrets of Happiness. I don't know. Look it up. I'll send you a link. And in the book, Hector travels the world, and he writes a list of what it means to be happy all over the world. And so I made a mental list of things that make me happy and things that I should focus my time on. And that's what I challenge you to do in your spare time, is make a mental list of things that make you happy and start doing them more. And so what it was for me was I liked to write plays a lot, so I wrote a lot of plays. I had just finished a playwriting class, so I continued my learning, and I wrote plays. And then I just wrote in general, because I like writing, and I wrote songs, and I hung out with my friends more, and it was a good experience. And so I started focusing on things that made me happy. And yeah, and so one of the things that made me happy was songwriting. And I started to write songs to myself, giving advice to me. And I am going to share one of them with you today, and it will end my little speech on things that I've learned. So I hope that you take the lessons that I learned over my senior year and bring them into your life. And this is a song called Life is Hard. There was a young girl down and confused, went to an older woman who was kind, soft-spoken, very nice, and asked her for some advice. And she said, people will tell you that the world is in your hands and you could change it if you like. That life's a stage and it's you who holds the mic. They'll say it's a journey and not the destination, an artwork of your creation. Well, I say, don't listen to people who spout that bull. Those kinds of kids are full of cliches, and you can't spend your days on fortune cookies. So listen to me, life is hard, and often good deeds go without reward. Life is hard, and you can walk forever without getting very far. Oh, and I know you'll try to live without regret, but you'll have some when things are said and done. And I know that you'll always try your best. Sometimes it seems that failure never rests, and there will be people who don't like you, who disapprove of the things you do, people of whom you cannot change. Just to know that no one is the same, and life is hard, and often good deeds go without reward. Life is hard. You can walk forever without getting very far. And don't you dare convince yourself that this life is fair, 'cause you'll have bad days, you'll have horrid days, Please know in this time disaster is blind. 'Cause you'll have good times, oh great times, filled with loud laughs and cheap wine. And you'll meet good people, know great people, meet wonderful people. And they'll make you forget all your regrets, and they'll make you dream, and they'll make life seem not so hard.